So when it comes to like bad or poor video game releases, we typically get at least a few every single year. The ones that stand out to me in 2023 are Gollum, you've also got Redfall, and now you have Skull Island Rise of Kong. And Skull Island Rise of Kong right now is fairly popular, but not for people playing the game. The game has just become one gigantic meme. It's peaked at 22 players, so not even 25 people in the world have ever played at the same time on Steam. It's had a high concurrent peak of 22 players. It's got 58 reviews on Steam, sitting at 36% positive. And if you was to buy this game, it's going to set you back £35, unless you buy the bigger edition, the Colossal Edition, which is like an extra £12-13 on top of that. I mean, it did launch with a 20% discount, but that doesn't really make a difference because that's still way too overpriced. But what the Colossal Edition will do for you is let you change the colour of Kong and make the game look even worse than it does on its standard setting, because it gives you film grain filters like sepia, black and white, so on and so forth. And not too long after the release of this awful game, the developers have spoken out about the bad reviews. They provided some interesting insights into a game that's panned as one of the worst of 2023. So it says here, and I'll leave this article linked in the description if you want to read it for yourself. It says, the team behind the recently launched and widely panned Skull Island Rise of Kong have spoken out about the game's bad reception, revealing that it was only in development for a year. And I'm going to say straight up, that's no excuse. It's a load of shit that's one of the reasons this is a bad game. It says, released on October 17th, Skull Island Rise of Kong features a young King Kong on a quest to avenge the death of his parents. He sets out across the eponymous island, growing from a young orphan to a mature and powerful ape, to seek out the land's alpha predator, Gore. And the thing is, a lot of people have pointed this out. You're supposed to be playing as King Kong, and he's the smallest thing on your screen a lot of the time. He's supposed to be a giant, but they've just scaled him down so that it's just like a normal ape sort of character. And it continues to say, before Skull Island Rise of Kong even officially released, images and clips of the game began appearing on social media. None of the accompanying captions were favourable, with the majority mocking or expressing disbelief at the state of the game. In short, it looked like a PS2 release that was fit to challenge Gollum for the title of the worst game of 2023. Even at the time of writing, Rise of Kong only has 57, that's what it says here, it's got 58 now, reviews on Steam, and sits at a mostly negative rating. I'd say the rating's far too high for this game. But some of the game's developers at Iguana B in Santiago, Chile spoke with The Verge and revealed that the game was only in development for a year, which essentially doomed it from the start, which is bullshit, and I can tell you that because when it comes to games having a short development time, fair enough, they're not going to be as polished and stuff as what the developers want. But it's not the case that it's been a year, because when you look back to Anthem, they said it was a 7-year cycle for the game, but it was 5 years of pre-production, and it was only around 14 or 15 months before the game released that they had actually finished the first mission. So they had around a year, maybe a little bit more than a year to work on Anthem, and Anthem looks and plays about 1 million times better than this piece of shit they're calling Skull Island Rise of Kong. And they said Skull Island Rise of Kong fell victim to a development cycle that often afflicts licensed games, a tight turnaround time and an even tighter budget. Members of the Iguana B team who spoke anonymously for fear of repercussions from the publisher, I mean, that is fair enough, publishers don't really like their devs talking out. Now, they stated that work on the game began in June 2022, and crunch kicked in around Feb 2023, with development expected to be completed in June 2023. So they've had a little bit less time than what Anthem did, but look at the difference between Anthem and... I'm not even going to call it Skull Island Rise of Kong anymore, we'll just call it Kong. So Kong was published by an aptly named company, Game Mill, which apparently regularly contracts small indie developers to crank out games quickly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the publisher that's known for releasing shovelware. And this inevitably compromises the quality even from workers who might otherwise produce good work. One former Iguana B employee who didn't help with Kong, but had experience with other Game Mill titles, stated that the team very often didn't receive the information necessary to do their job well. This was quite frustrating because we had to improvise with the limited information we had on hand, the developer said. So there is a mixture of different problems with Kong, but the fact that they're blaming the lack of development time as a big part of it is not right. because there's a lot of problems and companies have made games like infinitely better than Kong in the same amount of time, and some even make really good games in less time. The time is nothing to do with it. They're developers. They should be able to develop this sort of stuff. Maybe it's the lack of budget, the lack of instructions, the publisher in general just being a shit publishing company. You cannot just blame the time, and I'd say at all you can't really blame the time you have to develop, especially when you're slapped into crunch for 4 months. That means you're working more hours, you're basically doing your job for a longer period of time each day, which means more development would happen. And yeah, there's going to be burnout, frustration, and things like that, so things aren't going to go how they should. And I'm going to say, ultimately, this isn't the developers' fault. I'm not going at the developers for this. This is the publishers. They're assholes, and I'm pretty sure they are the ones known for shovelware. And it is nice to get insight from the developers, but I wouldn't really say it's valid to put it down to the lack of development time, because including the crunch and stuff, I would say they've had way more than enough time to make a game better than what they did. So it's not that you're going to get a perfect game released with only a year's worth of development, it's that you can easily do a better job with that amount of time. And it says the tight budget of course further impacted the successful completion of projects. Game Mill would simply not provide enough money to retain experienced staff, and another Iguana Bee developer recounted the story of a colleague who was laid off despite having been on the team longer. Deep down I knew it was because the publisher didn't provide them with enough funding to maintain a certain number of people for an extended period, so they're not paying their staff properly, they can't retain their staff, they don't communicate with their staff. Game Mill were just a really shitty company. I don't know how they're still around, and how they're getting access to licensed titles, something based on King Kong. How have they got the licensing for that brand? It is ridiculous. But it says, despite appearances, the development team at Iguana Bee is capable of producing good games. In March 22, the studio collaborated with developer studio Voyager and publisher Untold Tales to create What Lies in the Multiverse, an award-winning puzzle platformer that currently has a very positive rating on Steam. What's unfortunate is that a product like Kong will have negative repercussions on the reputation of Iguana Bee, which will therefore be less likely to receive funding for the games it wants to make. Instead, the devs will have to keep accepting contracts from Game Mill and other publishers that only want licensed games. So all round it's sad, and again, we've spoken about this recently, it's a sad time for the developers. They always get the short end of the stick, they're always the ones being laid off, and they're the ones that typically get blamed for games being bad, and it's not the case. And I feel bad for the developers, but at the same time, they've created the game that is shit, so they deserve a portion of the hate and stuff, especially when you've collaborated on a game that's got awards. But then it does state it in the name, they collaborated, so they didn't create the game on their own. So they might be good at helping other companies make good games, but they're not good at creating good games themselves. But I thought I'd bring you this video because I did do I believe it was a do not buy. I thought I'd bring you this because there's insight and it's going to be interesting to quite a few people in my opinion, as to why the developers are saying Skull Island Rise of Kong has done so bad. And on that note, we are going to leave the video there. If you enjoyed it, leaving a like is appreciated. If you wish to support me further as a creator, there are links in the description. Let me know your thoughts about the video in the comments. And if you want to watch more, you can click the video on screen. All support on the channel is greatly appreciated, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.